Get the mic set up. Can we test it? Is it hearing me now? Because I'm sitting here touching it. I'm sure that's doing really well. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate y'all coming in. It's right at 10:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. We got a few things kind of new this year. I hope it turns out well. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, we're doing online as well. If y'all could, please turn your cameras off. We don't need them on your side. Just slow everything down if you can. We'll try to keep you muted too. If for some reason you come unmuted, that's no problem at all. We'll get that fixed. Hopefully you guys can see me. The screen is shared too. Let me know if there's any issues on that side. So obviously I'm going to be talking back and forth between the computer and live, so please forgive me for that for a few seconds. Obviously my name is Eric Reedy. I'm the Chief of the State Revolving Fund, and I'm sure as most of you are aware, we have quite a lot going on the last couple of years. Now, this specifically is an SRF workshop, but you'll notice I do have one or two slides on ARPA. But for all intents and purposes, let's keep it to SRF conversations. The majority of the folks who were invited to this were either applied through SRF or were funded themselves. So there's a lot of new requirements. EPA has really pushed up their details on the projects, and we want to make sure we're hitting all those so that there's no issues long term. So we got a couple different speakers, myself, and then I'm going to introduce Mr. Bobby Rowland, who is the Operator Certification Chief. I wanted him just kind of come and introduce himself as someone who is new to the program, and Operator Certification is now under the SRF under me as well. So I'm going to introduce Bobby. He'll give a quick few words, and then I'll come back up and we'll continue. So Bobby Rowland, appreciate it. Okay.
Yay.
I'm just kidding.
Thank y'all. Like I said, I don't know how many of y'all, you're all working in water or wastewater plants doing these projects. They all have operators. Jim Graciano was the chief for 15, 20 years. He retired last August, and I took his place for the operator certification. There was plans to update the regulations. That is on hold for now. That's what we've been telling everybody since I took over. We were putting that on hold. We are working on getting a new platform for the operators so that everything will be online. All the exams, all the renewals, everything that the operators do, their certifications, when they take their classes, they'll be able to do all that online and submit that digitally. Pay online. We won't have any more paper forms. We're actually in the process of working on the development now. Our vendor is working with us starting today. Today's the first day. We started about 8:30 this morning, going through their system and telling them what we need and looking at what they have. So that will be coming out. So anytime you talk to your systems, if you are systems, I know some of y'all are contractors, let them know that their operators will have a new platform. We're hoping we're doing the water and wastewater first. That's the majority of our workload. We have landfill operators and well drillers as well, but we're working on them first. 6 months or so for development. We've been sending out a newsletter the last couple of quarters out of our OpCert email, so that's going out to any certified operator, and we've asked for volunteers for beta testing for that. We got about 100, a little over 100 operators and systems that's going to beta test this system for us once we get to the point of having something that they can use. So we're hoping to have that out. Like I said, in the next 6 months, I think being able to pay online is going to help a lot, and filling out these applications online, it's going to make it a lot better. The operators seem to be excited about it. And that was the main thing I wanted to talk about, is just let y'all know if y'all deal with anybody with the regulations, that regulation change that Jim was working on is still on hold, and we will have a new system coming up. I do have the same phone number, so if anybody did have anything that they worked with Jim Graciano on, I retained his phone number. It's 334-279-3071. So if there's any operator certification questions, y'all can give me a call. And my email is browland, B for Bobby, ROWLAND, at 8m.alabama.gov. And that was the main thing. I just wanted to point that out and introduce myself. And I know y'all work a lot with the operators and a lot with the systems. So any information y'all can spread, let them know that we are moving forward with our new platform. It'll be helpful.
Great.
So,
thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
All right. Well, and again, it's always difficult taking over for somebody who's, done that for a long time. And Jim obviously was, I'm sure most of you know, was here for a long time. Bobby's been doing a really good job in terms of getting everything updated to modern time. Now, I will say, a lot of our operators are getting a little older. They're kind of getting to that age where maybe they don't want to deal with computers or anything like that. If that's the case, give us a call. We'll be happy to help them. We'll do anything we can to make their job and their application for certification a lot easier. We are working on a few other things, which I want to mention too. Hopefully some education, some marketing, some outreach. And again, some good stuff will hopefully be coming out of operator certification here shortly, because the bottom line is we need operators to operate these systems that we're doing all these upgrades on. So thank you, Bobby. Appreciate it. And he'll be working on that database, so definitely stay in tune. All right, so we'll get into the state revolving fund portion of this. And I first want to say, as I mentioned at the top, I know we have a ton going on. I appreciate everybody's patience. I know there's a lot of folks on the other side who have worked with us probably for a couple of years now with different funding pots. It has been a lot of work, and I'll admit that openly to you guys, and obviously on your side it is as well. I know we've hit you with deadlines, we've hit you with requirements that are new. Please continue to be patient and work with us. It's really a good thing, and there's a ton of money available if we hit these milestones, okay? So, of course it's not going to work. That's a good start. One second. For some reason, you just have to hit the mouse once. Okay. All right, so we'll talk about the base SRF program, BIL, and then I also want to mention some other programs which I think most people don't know about, and they really are really helpful. They're smaller pots of money, but hey, free money's always good. So you notice ARPA is not on here. Again, this is not an ARPA workshop, although as soon as I say that, here's ARPA. Just the only thing I'm going to remind people with ARPA is about the deadlines, okay? And these are very, very important. We already passed June and August is coming. So if you notice, a bunch of people should have gotten letters that stated reports were starting this month. So obviously I just put reporting starts. I did not put a website link. Come August 1st, you are going to receive correspondence from us with a link to our website. It makes this reporting so much easier. It has set questions you have to answer, and then every month from then on, you can essentially say nothing has changed, or here's what's changed. You're not going to have to do some long narrative style report for a long time. So those are going to be required monthly going forward for the next 2 years until you finish your project. Now, I know that sounds cumbersome, but the whole point is here, finish the project, you don't have to do them, right? So that is what we're trying to do, is to get people to do the project, start construction, spend this money as quick as possible, okay? Now, most of the time we reference a December 2026 date. This June 30 date is internal. We made it more stringent because we don't want to get to December and have to give money back. Now, again, we are not looking to just take money and leave you hanging. If for some reason you get to January of 26 and you're running into trouble, we have other funds, which we'll talk about today. We can strictly move you, okay? So it's important to communicate, important to be upfront with us. That will make sure you get your project done, okay? And again, I understand you don't want to lose your ARPA money. Again, it's okay. We'll work with you some other way. Just please be honest with us, because we're not giving a dollar of this back to the feds. And come December 26th, we're not going to have a choice. That's exactly what's going to happen. Okay, that's it for ARPA. Everything's done. So now our other funding sources, okay? And SRF and BIL are kind of grouped together because I think a lot of people find this confusing. BIL is just like the SRF. It is a loan program with principal forgiveness. Now, BIL does afford us a larger amount of principal forgiveness, which is great. But still remember, it is a loan. It is 2.2%. Principal forgiveness is possible. And the thing I added this year was technical assistance, okay? So number one, EPA provides technical assistance. So if any of you guys are struggling to find engineers or get your design work done, EPA's got a lot of resources there. We are also starting some technical assistance on the sewer side for some smaller systems like septic tanks, okay? That will not be, at this point, available to the bigger systems other than what EPA offers, okay? That request for proposal for that program will come out sometime this year. So if y'all are interested in septic tank removal or replacement, definitely get with me and respond to that as well. Should be coming out this summer. So getting into the BIL, again, just trying to avoid some confusion here. There's essentially 3 pots of money within the BIL. And like I said, it's the base SRF program. And I know you guys online can't see me pointing at this, but I'm pointing at the base. It's general SRF, right? So if you're SRF, BIL is the same thing. We call that just base BIL. Now the other 2 pots that are new with BIL, which we've been marketing, but there hasn't been a ton of demand yet for that 3rd one especially. But the lead service line, again, just like it sounds, can replace lead service lines. And we'll go into that in a little more detail in a little bit. Inventories are included on that. And then emerging contaminants. Now, this one is specific drinking water and clean water. So you can do wastewater EC as well. Now, again, we haven't had a ton of takers with that, but if you've got ideas, we'd be happy to hear them. And for the lead service line specifically, this is where I really want to hit hard because this is coming up. The inventories are due in October. Number one, this is a professional service. A lot of folks have kind of assumed this is like an A&E type thing where it doesn't have to be procured. That is not the case. Now, you can do a request for qualifications, a request for proposal. That is totally fine. It has to be procured. We cannot reimburse costs for inventories that are not procured. I want to make that very clear. Now, in the past, we have not done a ton of preliminary design projects, and so this is relatively new for us, but you do still need an application, no EID. So there's no environmental involved with that as well for the inventories. Now, for the lead service line, and again, I want to bring up a couple things that I hopefully will clarify, just the service lines and the lead joints. So that includes like galvanized service lines downstream of joints. It does not include the main line. And that was a lot of confusion early on. Even EPA wasn't sure. So again, we appreciate y'all's patience as these funds have kind of been fleshed out. But early on, everyone was assuming it was the whole thing, right? You're not just going to cut a service line off and then leave the main. That's exactly what they want you to do. So with that said, what we're doing is we're splitting these projects. If you have main line work on there, we'll put them in the base BIL I talked about earlier, and then put the specific lead service line portion in that lead service line pot. That lead service line pot has more principal forgiveness. It's got 49%. So there is a large grant portion with that as well. So again, we're going to try to hit the lead service lines with as much of that grant money as we can, the main line with either BIL and or SRF money. So EC, now again, we have requested and been allocated a lot of EC money. Alabama is one of the handful of states that are pretty largely affected. And unfortunately, I'll say we have not had a ton of takers, okay? I've had a few people apply for pilot testing, which will probably be funded in 24, which is coming up. But we've also got remediation, okay? And that's the big thing. We want to get rid of this stuff. So if you're actually doing carbon columns, if you're doing reverse osmosis, new source, consolidation, all of that is eligible. If you've got PFOS or PFOA, use this pot of money. It's 100% free, and if we don't use it for EC, we can't use it. So please call me. Again, technical assistance, we're going to put out another RFP to give some more technical assistance for EC funding specifically, so we'll have some help for you there as well as EPA. Again, look for that this summer if you're interested in joining us in essentially doing that technical assistance. So here's another pot of money. Again, this is outside the BIL, but I put it here. And I want to make it very clear, this one is less than 10,000 population. We got $76 million in this pot of money, just for less than 10,000. Now, what does that mean? The good thing about this is, let's say you're a bigger system and you've done the remediation. You've got an RO system. Well, there's no reason for a town of a few hundred folks to do an RO as well right next to you. So if you consolidate, if you interconnect, if you are solving other people's PFOS problem, you can use this pot of money. All right, so keep that in mind. If you are helping a smaller neighbor, that's really good and we would love to help fund it, okay? So we can run distribution only when picking up another town. We cannot run distribution if you just have PFOS in your source. That's just going to be a source thing. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, of course, if you're less than 10,000 and you want to do remediation yourself, that is also here, but I wanted to point out that it's not just limited to small systems, it's whoever's helping small systems. So this may be a little difficult to see, but this is essentially the grand sum of our funding, okay? So every pot that I just talked about, here's what we're expecting the next 3 years. So as you can see, and again, I know people online can't see, but I'm gonna highlight the two bottom rows, that EC, SUDC. That's the one I was just talking about. That's 79 million. And again, no one has taken this yet. So I've got 79 million for these small system EC funds, okay? Now, I'll also point out all the drinking water BIL. So we got another 30 million coming every year, and you're talking about a total of 44 million. So we generally get, 8 to 10 million in free money. You're talking about that's fourfold now. So we still have a lot of money coming, and if you either did not get funded the last couple of years, or you've got more projects coming, please apply. I can't stress that enough. I mean, we still got money coming. I know we have a lot of applications in-house, but we are always soliciting for more. We never stop accepting them, okay? So, of course, it's hard to read all this stuff at the exact same time. I put a lot of this stuff to use as a reference. This will go online. It'll be on YouTube. This will be on our website, so you can reference all this stuff. You don't have to read it all right now, of course. So, a couple of things I want to mention. And this is why it's important, especially when you do your pre-apps and your applications, to make sure that you are telling us exactly what kind of project it is. So last year we got actually four without the one I just talked about, but 3 besides the EC that just kind of dropped in our lap. EPA came and said, hey, we've got this, you've got a month to apply. And I look through our project roster and I see which one fits the best. And so if you don't apply, that's not going to be for you. If you don't tell us you're correcting SSOs, you're not going to be in that pot. If you don't tell us that you have, a generator because a tornado hit, you're not going to be eligible for that Sadra pot. So a lot of these have specific requirements that say, due to climate change or the weather, they're putting in a generator, you're eligible, that kind of thing. So the WIN Act itself was specifically to remove disinfection byproducts. So if you had that in your PER, you would have been eligible for that as well. So again, be very, very detailed in what you guys are correcting as well as the project you're actually putting in. It could help you get some more funding. All right, so that's really all the pots of money, a general timeline, and again, I appreciate everybody's patience. I know this timeline's been a little stretched the past couple of years while we dealt with ARPA and all this influx of funding. We're finally starting to come out of the storm though. We're starting to close a lot of these loans that we've had hanging out there for 22 and 23. So in general, you first do a pre-application, and that includes your preliminary engineering report. That's your funding application. So at that point, you're asking us, I have a project, I need this much money. That's the pre-application. We approve the funding, then you start doing the environmental work, the legwork, and the application, and the EID, and of course the financial review. So once we approve that, we close the loan. Obviously there's a pre-construction process, which is very important because we approve and see everything prior to you going. And I would honestly, even if that wasn't the case, I would appreciate if y'all did that for everything. Because I'm telling you, if you get pre-approval from us, you don't have to worry later on that we're not going to pay it or anything like that. Surprises are always the worst, okay? Just communicate with us, be upfront. It really does help things long term. So again, just a couple things I'm going to point out. Make sure you're submitting your plans and specs to us to review before you're going to bid. Make sure you're including our supplemental general conditions. And one of the biggest problems that we see from year to year, from project to project, are the disadvantaged business enterprise solicitation, okay? Please, if you do nothing else or hear nothing else, make sure you are doing that DBE solicitation. That is an automatic no fund if you don't do that. We cannot touch it if you don't do the DBE solicitation, which I'll have a little more detail on later. So during the construction phase, again, minimal requirements, but there are requirements. Davis-Bacon, American Iron Steel, and then BABA, which Mr. Laney will handle here shortly. He'll give you a little synopsis on what BABA is coming. I've got a couple exercises later. I want to make it very clear that, again, you have to follow all these requirements to get our funding. So please do this up front. Or ask us. If you have problems, please ask us. We'll be happy to help you. So I'm going to go through each step. I'm not going to do a lot on how to apply because, again, most of you have applied. That's why you're here. So how to apply, pre-application form, and I did 370. There's also the clean water form as well, but just as an example. It's all on adm.alabama.gov. If you have any questions, again, call us. We'll be happy to point you there. Preliminary engineering report, and then current financial audits. Now, We usually require a 3 years average, but if you're working on audits, send us the most recent you got. That'll get you started. Again, as I mentioned earlier, note the specific project scopes. That'll really help you a ton. So if you've got lead service lines, if you've got EC, make sure you say that in the description. That'll help a ton. And again, contact us with questions. All right, so once you apply kind of a basic look into our process, we rank the projects based on what you're submitting in the pre-apps. That's why you're filling them out. I promise you they just don't go into a black hole. We're actually looking at that stuff. So we look at median household income, the growth of the population over a 10-year period, unemployment data, average annual water bill, and then the Justice 40 map. So that essentially goes into what we call our disadvantage criteria, okay? So once you're approved for funding, let's say you got funding, we do this step next to see what amount of that funding is either loan or principal forgiveness, okay? So it's not magic, we don't pull it out of a hat. It all comes from this ranking, and everyone has the same opportunity to get this rank and the funding as everyone else, okay? So again, small communities always help. If you're less than 10,000, you're automatically gonna have a nice bump in the rank, and that's on purpose. All right, so affordability, what do we do with the audits? We look at them for what we call coverage ratio, okay? So we take the amount you've requested, we put that in your debt, we divide that by revenue, we get a coverage ratio, okay? So 1.1 times, you're paying 10% more in revenue, or you're gaining 10% revenue more than you're spending in debt. If you're less than 1.1, you technically cannot take a loan without a rate increase. Now, notice it says recommend. It does not say require. If you choose not to do it, you just won't get any money, okay? We can't force you to do that, but we can pull the funding, okay? So keep that in mind. When we're asking you to do these things, is to make sure you can take the money and actually pay us back. All right, and then you get to the application process. Again, this is where kind of the legwork happens. You got your site certificates, your title council, plus the EID document. And again, for preliminary design, engineering only projects, no EID is required. Now, I did want to mention a couple things here. Again, plans and specs, make sure you're getting those to us. A lot of times we get a lot of questions, why aren't we getting paid? Step one in getting paid is submitting those plans and specs. That's your first work product, especially for engineers. You're not getting paid until you submit a work product. Just that simple, really. The other thing is make sure you're including those consulting contracts for your engineers. We've seen a lot of those. Again, we're all busy, totally understand. Just make sure you're getting those to us because we do get payment requests without contracts, then we got to track those down. It just slows us down. Now the outlay schedule, I do want to point out something pretty important here that's not obvious. There is a section in the application that says outlay schedule, and it's essentially a table, and it doesn't look very, menacing. It's very important. That determines your payback date. And so it determines the amount of capital interest you're going to get. So if it's an 18-month construction period, that's all the time you're gaining capital interest because we don't make you pay it back until construction ends. So the one thing I want to point out here is there are no capital interest options. If you are interested in that, just let me know. That's definitely something to do. We don't want to stick a bunch of capital interest if you don't want it, okay? So again, when you fill out that outlay schedule, a lot of people just divide by 12, divide by 18, have some kind of set period. Just give it a little more thought next time because this is determining when you're going to pay it back. So just keep that in mind. Or if you're going to pay any capital interest as well. Oh, and then the EID, again, I think we've been doing this a lot. I'm going to point out a couple things. The floodplain map, please include that. Not just the map, actually say something about it. Say, this area is not in the floodplain, et cetera, et cetera. Just have some kind of analysis so we know what we're looking at. EPA is looking for that as well. Make sure you're doing your 4 project alternatives. Now, the public advertising and meeting. I know newspapers have been kind of going away. We are going to change it to where you can do like water bills, you can do city hall postings, that kind of thing. As of now, attempt to use the newspaper as much as possible. We're going to change that to hopefully have an online kind of clearinghouse. Maybe you can use our website. We hadn't gotten there yet though. But we are hoping to update that at some point because the newspapers are struggling, for lack of a better term. All right, again, I'm not going to go a ton over this, but I did want to mention the different supplemental conditions, the general conditions, okay? When you get a fundability letter, we've changed them this year. Y'all should have gotten them recently when you got the invite for this. It is going to say you are this fund, okay? Now, it is on us to send you the correct SGCs, but it's always nice to have a double check for the folks that we're sending this to. We have a lot that we're sending it to, so just make sure you understand what fund you're coming from, because BIL has one major difference, and I'm sure some of y'all have seen that, as the sign. They are obsessed with that sign. The number one thing we're going to do when we come out and inspect is take a picture of that BIL sign, all right? Please make sure if you have a BIL project, you are putting that sign up. That is absolutely important. Obviously, with the SRF project, sign hadn't changed. It did actually change last year. Sorry, don't call me a liar. We did add one logo to it, so again, make sure you're using the most up-to-date ones, which we'll make sure to send you as it's getting that point. All right, and again, I'm going to hit this hard because DBE is one of the #1 sources of us having issues and making people go out to bid. Please make sure you're doing the 6 good faiths. Again, this is going to be online for everybody to reference. Make sure you are doing this. Keep documentation for the correspondence you sent. So if you're sending emails, we don't need the whole list of emails, but you should keep them. When we audit you, we should be able to find them, okay? It's nice to have a nice, we generally send these in packages, so just stick to the forms, which I'll have a little thing on that later as well. Please stick to the guidance we're giving you. We do that to make it easier. We're reviewing, 700 projects at a time. If we have to constantly go back and rehash all these, it really does slow everybody down. And the #1 thing we want y'all to do is get construction started and go out to bid. So this really slows us down. Make sure if you have any questions about DBE or if you're doing it right, ask us ahead of time. It's so important. Please get this. It has to be done. I cannot stress that enough. All right, Davis-Bacon AIS. I think, again, we've been dealing with this quite a long time. Hopefully none of this is new. Davis-Bacon, just incorporate those wage rates into your project. That should be straightforward. Do your interviews. Make sure you're maintaining payrolls. We will look at those during the inspection. The real thing I want to point out here is the American Iron Steel. Okay, now again, we've been doing this for a long time, but as John will come up here in a minute and tell y'all, BABA's coming. So what does that mean for AIS? It means absolutely nothing. You continue on doing AIS just like everything else. So now we have AIS and BABA. They are both subject to every project we do. Please keep that in mind. AIS does not go away. All right, and that's supposed to be AIS, not Davis-Bacon, so please ignore that. But again, what I want to point out here, and everybody online pointing at this exempt materials, this is what BABA changes. This is the big difference, okay? And it's not everything, but that's really where the issue is going to come in. And so really, the only thing I'm going to say before John comes up here and gives you a little more detail on BABA is, again, must comply with AIS and BABA. It does not change. It's not an or. All funding sources, ARPA, BIL, SRF, any of those other sources, all are subject to BABA. And this is the big one that I mentioned the last slide, introduces construction materials. And so that is the big, you're talking about electrical boxes, which we all know are short right now. So we're hoping EPA does some national waivers, but we're not going to assume that, okay? So as of now, all of this is in effect. So every project going forward is going to be subject to the BABA requirements. All right, and I'm going to let John Laney come up and do a little expose on BABA, and I'll get that spreadsheet ready, or the presentation ready. Give us 1 second, guys, as we switch this out. Yeah, it's right there. Sometimes, or I had to hit it. Hang on, I think I still got mine. Let's see. There it is. Okay. All right, I think you have to do this, and now the clicker should work. It should work.
Yeah, that worked.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Well, Eric was talking about BABA and AIS. The nice thing is we're coming to the end of the road where you have to really figure that out, because BABA is AIS. It includes it. And you'll see the forms that we have as we go along, but we have a transition period that we're going through right now. And when we started off about a year or 2 years ago, we were telling everybody that if your project predates 14 May 22, then you automatically will come under AIS, and anything after that would be a BABA project. And that means if the project was conceived, but that is no longer true, because in November of 23, EPA modified the BABA waiver to where now if you have two conditions you must meet. One is your project has to be conceived prior to 14 May 22, and it has to be funded in either fiscal year 2022 or 2023. So even if a project was conceived prior to 14 May 22, and if you get funding out of funding sources from fiscal year 2024, you automatically have to meet BABA. You lose that waiver variance. And so that's the world that we have today and the world that we're living in. And items that are covered by BABA, before we get into the details, the easiest way to think about BABA, if it covers everything, there's nothing it doesn't cover, with the exception of, like if you looked at this room, the things that wouldn't be covered by BABA are the chairs and the video monitors on the wall. Everything else as a permanent fixture is covered by BABA. And the items that are covered are iron and steel manufactured products and construction materials, items that should only be classified items should only be classified into one of three categories. They either need to be iron and steel, or let's see, where was that up there? They're consumed in, incorporated into, or fixed to an infrastructure, permanently incorporated. Those are items that are included in BABA. It does not apply to items brought to and moved from the construction site prior to the completion of the infrastructure, temporary scaffolding, or the reinforcement. If you're digging a trench and you're putting in the retainers to keep the trench walls from falling in, you're going to remove those after a project, so that's not covered by BABA. And it doesn't apply to equipment and furnishings that are used at or within the finished infrastructure, chairs, desks, portable computers, that type of thing. But everything else is covered by BABA. We have iron and steel. Those are items that are predominantly iron or steel, unless another standard applies under a law or regulation. All manufacturing processes from the initial melting stage through the application of coatings must occur in the U.S. under BABA. Manufactured products, which is different from iron and steel. Those are products manufactured in the U.S. The cost of the components that are mined, produced, or manufactured in the U.S. is greater than 55% of the total cost of all components of the manufactured product, unless another standard for determining the minimum amount of domestic content has been established on the applicable law or regulation. So there are exceptions, but they're not exceptions. That 55% is the key. And if you look at the diagrams that they show you on how this is calculated, the thing that isn't included, which is interesting, is that if you actually manufacture something at a location, the money you put into it is not included in that 55% calculation, but all the labor and everything that goes prior to that is included. Construction materials that includes non-ferrous metals, plastic and polymer-based products, including PVC, composite building materials, and polymers used in fiber optic cables, glass, lumber, drywall. It excludes items made primarily of iron or steel, manufactured products, cement and cementitious materials, aggregates such as stone, sand, and gravel, aggregate binding agents, or additives. And it says, the reason it says it excludes items made primarily of iron and steel and construction materials is because the iron and steel is covered under the iron and steel category. You can't be iron and steel, you can't be construction material. You can only be one of the 3 categories that are allowed. And then you have 5 elements of a manufacturer certification. And I can't overemphasize this because we already have projects that have gone out and bought equipment and they're running into problems getting the manufacturer certification for the bobble. You need to do this up front and make sure you can get those certification letters before you accept delivery of the material. But you've got, and it's very similar to the AIS letters, but the letter's got to be on company letterhead and signed by a company representative. It references the project number, the list of products that are being provided, the city and state of manufacturer, the reference to BABA, and it should include the wording meets BABA requirements for manufactured products in that letter. And then we have BABA waivers. And the BABA waiver authority is the EPA may waive by American preference where the EPA finds that applying the domestic content of procurement preference would be inconsistent with the public interest, which is a public interest waiver. So in other words, it would be an example of that would be is if it would take the project cost and magnify it such that you couldn't do the project, you conceivably apply that as a public interest waiver because the public would not be able to get a health need met. Types of iron and steel manufactured products or construction materials are not produced in the United States in sufficient and reasonably available quantities or of satisfactory quality. That's a non-availability waiver. And then we have inclusion of iron, steel manufactured products or construction materials produced in the United States that will increase the cost of the overall project by more than 25%, which is an unreasonable cost waiver. One of the things that I'm working on right now with one project is the non-availability waiver, and they need a particular type of meter box. And what we're finding is that EPA does work with you very closely. They listen to what you have to say, and they will work with you to get that waiver. But where you run into trouble is when you wait till a project starts to start asking for these waivers. The waivers need to be requested at the very beginning. If you see that you're going to have a specification within a project that does not meet BABA, that's the time to start trying to request that waiver. Don't wait till you get through your plans and specifications and your bidding process and are ready to start construction to start asking for BABA waivers. The engineers are going to need to recognize this ahead of time and start the waiver process if they feel like they're going to want a waiver. And the BABA waiver types, you've got project-specific waivers, and it's the MIAO office, which stands for Made in America office. It requests review subsequent to a 15-day public comment period. And then you have a general applicability waiver, which the MIA requests review before the public comment period, and they have to be reviewed every 5 years. And what is the Made in America office? Basically what the Made in America office is, it's union representatives and representatives of manufacturers that meet to help determine whether or not a particular item should qualify for a BABA waiver. And if they feel like it doesn't because it's available in the U.S., and we've said you've got 25% impact on cost, if it's under that, then they're going to drive you to buy that item in the U.S. But it's a guardian, basically, to make sure that waivers aren't given unjustly. And the BABA waiver principles, we've got time limited. These agencies should identify a short, definite time frame, no more than 1 to 2 years. Ensure domestic producers have prompt access to the market. That's a time-limited waiver. You've got targeted waivers, and the waivers that are overly broad will tend to undermine domestic preference policies. Broader waivers will receive greater scrutiny from the Made in America office. And conditional waivers, and agencies are encouraged to issue waivers with specific conditions that support the policies of BABA. But those are the BABA waiver principles. Prior to a bid, bids must comply with either AIS or BABA. If you don't know, then you need to ask your SRF project manager which type of project that is. Is it an AIS project or a BABA project? Bid documents must state whether the bid must comply with BABA or AIS. The contractors should not be having to guess which way to go. That we need to say that up front so they know what their standard they're going to be held to. And pre-bid meetings must state which standard, AIS or BABA, the bids are required to meet. We need to take the guesswork out of this so that the contractors who really have the greatest risk out there trying to meet a lot of these requirements, they need to know up front what they're entering into. And again, this is the slide I had up first, and the reason I put it up first is so that this is very important that you realize the transition period that we're in. And the most important thing is that if you got your funding from fiscal year 22 or 23 and you had a BABA waiver, then you will continue to work that project that way. But if you got your project concept prior to 14 May 22 and your project funded beginning in fiscal year 24, you won't get an AIS waiver. It will have to come under BABA. The only exception that we are aware of to that is that if you have a project that started with funding in fiscal year 23 or 24 and you required a supplemental loan to go with that project, you would still stay under the designation you had before that project. So if it was an AIS project, it would stay AIS. If it was BABA, then it would continue as BABA. And with that, I'll open the floor up to any questions.
We'll hold the questions till after.
All right, okay.
Just to make it quick, I know we're running a little long. Thanks, John. All right, thanks, John. Yeah, and just to kind of catapult on that as well, we do not expect EPA to give any waivers. So I think I said that earlier, and you know, the Made in America office, from what we've heard from EPA, is attorneys. They're not engineers, and so they're looking at legality and, I mean, political in a certain way, but I wouldn't be that cynical about it. They believe in this rule, and they do not plan on modifying it. And so I would just, you know, you are welcome to ask for waivers. Anytime you go to EPA for the waiver, you can come through us. Essentially, the only thing we're going to do is forward it because we have no authority to waive anything except for that applicability waiver, which is going to end this year.
Eric, one
yes, sir.
comment on that is that they have to come through us if they want a waiver.
I thought EPA had said they could submit, so it does have to come through us.
We recommend the waiver because
Gotcha.
if we don't recommend the waiver, they won't even consider it.
That makes sense. So it does have to have our sign off,
Yes.
essentially. So yes, if you want to request a waiver for things like electrical boxes, it would have to come through us. Now, we have limited availability, time, resources to do market research. So again, if it's a reasonable request, we'll be happy to support you in that. But we are going to kind of give it the laugh test. It's got to at least be, you know, if you're asking for fence posts or something, we're going to scrutinize that pretty hard before we send it along. So just be aware of that. And if you're running into those problems, just please give us a call. I mean, again, I cannot stress enough, communication is the key. We really do try to give as much guidance and make it as easy as possible. So please reach out to us if that's a concern for you. But again, I just would not expect many waivers to be approved. The one that I had mentioned earlier that I've constantly cited is the electrical boxes. It is actually under review at EPA right now. And it could be a thing where they just keep it under review until the shortage ends. I mean, to be honest with you. And so I don't know what that means. We'll have to kind of play it by ear as we go. All right, thank you, John. That was great. Obviously, again, any questions, reach out to us. We'll be happy to ask or answer any specific ones, and then we'll have a little generic question session afterwards. All right, so moving on from BABA, kind of how it goes. Again, I'm going to just mention a few things. None of this has changed from past years except for a couple things that I'm going to specifically mention. All costs should be included in contracts and not to exceed amounts. We generally have to revise those occasionally. That's okay. Just please pay attention to your contracts. A lot of times we get deep into construction and change orders happen and things are moving fast. Just make sure we have the paperwork, because that slows us down. That can take weeks to go through, and then we find out it's actually just a change order in the end. It wastes a lot of time. So again, if you're asking yourself, hey, why is my payment not getting processed? Number one, I know everybody's busy, but number two, it's probably because of some small paperwork thing like that. So just make sure we're hitting all those check boxes. It does make it a lot easier. So a couple new things that I'm going to mention this year. Now, again, this is kind of best practice, and I'm highlighting this third bullet point for those online. Request payment at least quarterly. We have so many projects right now that, listen, some folks have the ability and they're blessed to be able to hold some of these invoices and not pay them right away. Please don't do that. We're getting 500-page payment requests. That's just too much burden on us when we have so many other projects. Try to keep them to a quarterly, and if they're large in a quarter, that we totally understand, but that generally keeps them reasonable and we can expedite these, because the bigger the payment request, the longer it's going to take us to process. And again, just a lot of stress there throughout the whole thing, okay? And I cannot stress this enough, and I've said it many times on purpose. Follow ADEM forms and templates. Do not modify our forms. Don't modify the numbers that we give you. A lot of times we fill this stuff out to the best that we can ahead of time. If they're not right, contact us. Don't just go, scratching stuff out. That again just makes the whole process more complicated. We're trying to expedite, make things quicker, and that includes following these templates and forms we give you, okay? We try to give you as much guidance up front on things like lead service line and BABA. We're kind of playing it by ear too, so sometimes we might not be completely accurate, and we, again, appreciate the patience, but we're interpreting what we're hearing from up top as well. So we try to get out in front of it, give you as much time to adjust and have forms and template as possible. Please use them. When they get changed and they get submitted, everybody's confused and we have a lot of problems. Paperwork. That really, payment, reimbursement, all the hard work's done. It's all paperwork. And paperwork sometimes can be a nightmare. So again, just please make sure you're keeping records. You have your invoices saved. You can have like a cover sheet that's an Excel sheet, adds everything up nicely. Any of that helps us process this stuff, okay? So I'm telling you, that really helps expedite everything when we're following everything, all the forms that we give you, okay? So again, this is a common problem in today's age. Everything's expensive. BABA's coming online. Everything's going up in price. If you have cost overruns in the middle of the project, you essentially have three options. Well, two options. Number one is to contact us. That's either way, okay? You can submit a supplemental application, and this is new with BIL. Because of all the principal forgiveness, you are eligible for principal forgiveness as a supplemental application. Now, within reason, we're going to make sure we're not inflating prices, we're not adding scope. It has to be the original scope. And again, I'm not going to really opine on the possibility of principal forgiveness, just know it's there. So if you have supplemental funding needs, please let us know. We'll help you with that and tell you kind of what your options are. Your second option there is to reduce the scope. Of course, we want you to finish the entire project. Some projects can reduce, some can't, depending on the nature, totally fine. Again, talk to us, contact us, we'll be happy to walk you through that. All right, so common problems, and this is going to be the last slide, and I'm hoping this is the one that we all take, okay? So again, failure to solicit DBE, MBE, WBE, primes, and subs, and documenting that solicitation is the number one problem. I cannot tell you how many times this past year my staff has come to me with, hey, DBE this, DBE that. Please follow the templates we give you, do the solicitation. We do have a goal to actually get some of these folks on these jobs, but for your sake, the requirement is only to solicit. That's it. You don't have to hire, you don't have to pick, whatever you want to do, all you have to do is solicit, okay? It's again, paperwork. I'm going to stress on that too. The paperwork has to be right. Again, as John went over, BABA, it's going to be tough, especially in this transition. We've got to get used to it. AIS came on about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, And it was kind of the same, and now we live with AIS pretty daily. I think Babel will get there, we just got to give it some time. We got to let the manufacturing kind of catch up. They really released it at the worst time, right? It's not like we have a bunch of money out there that we need to get spent. So it's something we got to deal with, but again, let us know. We will be as flexible as we can, but unfortunately with it being a federal reg, there's limited flexibility we can give you, okay? Cannot reimburse in-kind labor. We can do a materials only contract in that situation. If you want to do in-kind labor, that's fine. Just keep in mind, we cannot pay your staff. If you are paying them a paycheck, they can't get our money. And I'm going to end with contract change orders. And again, I know in modern times, prices are skyrocketing. I'll tell you our general rule of thumb, 20% or lower. Anything higher than that, I'm going to be asking you some serious questions. And I'm going to expect legitimate answers, not just, hey, prices went up. If it's 50, 60%, we're probably going to have a meeting to talk about it to make sure we're comfortable. Change orders are a massive source of fraud. We have not seen that in our program so far. I'm not saying anybody's doing that. It's just something we are going to scrutinize to no end. So if you know you're submitting something greater than 20%, go ahead and contact us because you're going to be meeting with us, okay? Please keep that in mind. And we cannot process payment requests unless we process the change order. So please don't submit them together. Submit a change order first, and then we'll talk about the reimbursement, okay? All right, and that's it. I know that was quite a lot. And again, I intended these slides to be kind of a reference. They'll be posted on our website. The video of us talking in here will be on YouTube, and I'll also have the team saved on our website as well. So again, nice reference for everybody, but again, I cannot stress enough, please call us. I know we're busy. I know it's going to take a day or two to get back to you, but we will, and we'll give you an answer, okay? Thank y'all, and again, thank you to John, thank you to Bobby, who I know is gone. I'll give you their information too as well. And I'll take some questions first from in the room, and then we'll go over the Teams chat and see if there were any questions there. Anybody got any questions?
Mayor, on supplemental applications,
Sure.
and I have one similar to this, we have an existing project and we filed a supplemental application, but that contract's still open. Can we add that supplemental application as a change order to that existing contract?
Good question. So essentially, the question was, he's got some supplemental funding and he's curious, the contract is still open. Can we just add the supplemental to the existing contract? So it's a little bit of a two-pronged question, right? I mean, you don't have to go out to rebid or anything like that, so the contract is fine.